Right. Hey guys, me Anthony back into the video. Actually, this time I watch a bit of a different one. This is about a woman cheating in the Boston Marathon. Her description: her name is Rosie Ruiz. First woman to finish in 1980. So yeah, here we go. Link to the original description at the end of this video. I forgot to mention, but yeah, let's do this.
In 1980, Rosie Ruiz ran the Boston Marathon, the oldest and most prestigious marathon in the world. She was unknown in the running world, and to everyone's surprise, she beat other reigning champions and became the first woman to cross the finish line. As she celebrated on the podium with her gold medal, it quickly became clear that something was not quite right. This is the story of Rosie Ruiz, the marathon cheater. Rosie Ruiz was born in Havana, Cuba in 1953 and immigrated to the United States at age 8 with only her brother. She lived with her aunts, uncles, and cousins in Hollywood, Florida, and remained separated from her parents for most of her childhood. Naturally, it was a major culture shock for young Ruiz, who suddenly felt very isolated in a foreign country where she barely knew the language. To help cope with this adjustment, Ruiz began running. She fell in love with the sport and competed in cross-country running in high school, but that came to a halt when she suffered a knee injury and had to undergo surgery. In her first year of college, Ruiz was involved in a serious car accident that caused major head trauma. She experienced severe headaches and even blackouts that lasted for months after the accident.
Nice.
She went back to the hospital to get her head examined, and doctors discovered a tangerine-sized tumor embedded in her skull. The tumor turned out to be benign, but she still needed surgery to remove it. After college, Ruiz moved to New York City and secured a job as an administrative assistant in Manhattan. She got an apartment right near Times Square and seemed to be enjoying the fast-paced big city life. However, in late 1977, Ruiz had her first run-in with the law. She allegedly stole credit cards from an acquaintance and amassed $1,500 in false charges. The acquaintance reported her to the NYPD, but Ruiz paid all the money back and the charges were dropped. In 1978, Ruiz's health problems returned when doctors discovered a defect in her skull left by the first brain surgery. She had yet another surgery to have a plastic plate inserted in her skull. Ruiz overcame some major hurdles in her early life, and she always turned to running as a way to cope. It was 1979, the year before she would go on to compete in the Boston Marathon, and she was finally healthy enough to start running again. She began running regularly through Central Park and on the treadmill, and after a few months, she decided to enter the New York City Marathon. The marathon is a long-distance foot race of 42.195 kilometers, or 26 miles and 385 yards. The name marathon comes from an ancient Greek myth, and the event was introduced at the first modern Olympic Games in Athens in 1896. Today, there are over 800 official marathon races held all around the world, and it remains one of the oldest and most popular sporting spectacles. The first New York City Marathon was held in 1970, so it was still a relatively new event when Ruiz decided she would compete in 1979. Although she was a talented and serious runner, Ruiz was not ready for a full marathon. It typically takes months to prepare, and elite marathon athletes train all year round with coaches. When Ruiz realized she missed the deadline to enter the New York City Marathon, she contacted the organizers and pleaded for a spot, claiming she was dying of brain cancer. The event's organizers were sympathetic and granted her an exemption. It was October 21st, 1979. The 10th annual New York City Marathon was underway. There were over 11,000 runners and 2.5 million spectators lined up along the race route. Ruiz stood at the starting line in a huge crowd of fellow competitors and took off as the starting shot was fired. Ruiz felt good. Her first 8 miles was strong and she was feeling confident. However, at the 10-mile mark, not even halfway, Ruiz began to tire. Determined to finish the race, she decided to take a shortcut. She walked off the course and headed for a nearby New York subway station. She did her best not to draw attention to herself as she boarded a train going north towards Manhattan and the finish line. The marathon was a huge event and it wasn't unusual to see competitors around the city, so Ruiz figured she probably didn't need to keep that low of a profile after all. In fact, she struck up a conversation with another passenger, Susan Morrow, a photographer who was also headed to the marathon's finish line in Central Park. Ruiz told Morrow she injured her ankle, but still wanted to go cheer on the other runners. As the two made their way to Central Park, Ruiz was clearly limping and leaned on Morrow's shoulder for support. Ruiz pushed through the crowd to the barricades at the finish line and declared herself an injured runner. She was taken to the medical tent where she told staff she had already finished the race, so they gave her a finishing time of 2 hours, 56 minutes and 29 seconds, placing her 11th in the women's ranking. This time also qualified her for the Boston Marathon. The Boston Marathon took place just 6 months after the New York City Marathon. It was the oldest and longest running marathon in the world, established in 1897, 1 year after the first modern Olympic Games. Rosie Ruiz was determined to complete the world-renowned marathon, but knew she had a long way to go if she wanted to run the race legitimately. On top of that, her friends and colleagues celebrated her achievement at the New York City Marathon, and her boss, who was also an avid runner, was especially impressed and even offered to pay for Ruiz's trip to Boston. Ruiz soaked up the attention and admiration, but pressure was also mounting. In the months before the Boston Marathon, Ruiz trained as hard as she could. Her anxiety was growing. Everyone she knew had lofty expectations of her, and she didn't want to disappoint anyone, or worse, expose her lie. Despite her best efforts to train, Ruiz knew deep down it had simply not been enough for her to even get close to her recorded time in the New York City Marathon. The Boston Marathon was also a much more established event, and there would be far more media coverage. It would be much more difficult to cheat this time. On the morning of April 21st, 1980, Rosie Ruiz made her way to the starting line of the 84th annual Boston Marathon. She was 26 years old, and her qualifying time from New York ranked her 50th among the female runners. Her bib was emblazoned with W50. Jacqueline Gouraud was standing just a little ahead of Ruiz in the nervous crowd. Gouraud was a Canadian marathon champion and the favorite to win the women's race. Patty Lyons was an American marathon champion and considered to be Gouraud's main competition. There were a total of 456 women and over 5,000 men competing that year, and Rosie Ruiz was on nobody's radar. The starting gun was fired and they were off. It was only a few miles into the race when Ruiz began to feel exhausted. She had trained hard, but it wasn't enough. There was no possibility of her completing the race. She could drop out of the race now, go home, and potentially have her lie revealed. Or she could cheat the same way she did in New York. So just like in New York, she jogged off the race route and found a spot out of view, where she hid for an hour. She then made her way to the closest train station and rode the train for another hour. This time, she didn't chat with any strangers and kept a low profile on the crowded train. Meanwhile, Jacqueline Gouraud had already been acknowledged as the women's lead at the halfway checkpoint, as well as at the 21 and 24-mile checkpoints. Fans at the finish line could see a woman approaching and everyone cheered, expecting to see Gouraud, but it was the unknown Rosie Ruiz, who was the first woman to cross the finish line at the 1980 Boston Marathon. The crowd roared as Ruiz flailed her limbs, falling onto police officers for support, seemingly unable to walk on her own anymore. Cameras surrounded her as a laurel wreath was placed on her head and a gold medal around her neck. Ruiz was all smiles and happy tears, but a sense of confusion and skepticism had already descended upon the finishing area of the Boston Marathon.
The bespoke AI Family Hub Plus refrigerator with AI Vision inside.
Ruiz crossed the finish line with a time of 2 hours, 31 minutes, and 56 seconds. This would have been the third fastest marathon time ever run by a woman. This would have also been a 25-minute improvement on her New York marathon time, which was just months ago. When Jacqueline Gouraud crossed the finish line, she was extremely confused. She was expecting huge cheers for her, but to her shock, another woman she didn't recognize had already been given the gold medal. Gouraud graciously accepted second place. But as she heard more details about Ruiz, she became very concerned. Bill Rogers, the men's winner, also realized something was not quite right. Like many other running fans, he expected Gouraud to be standing beside him on the winner's podium. Bill Rogers was a veteran marathon runner and a 4-time Boston champion. He took one look at Rosie Ruiz and knew a terrible mistake had been made. She was wearing a t-shirt with longer sleeves when most elite runners prefer thin sleeveless tank tops. She didn't appear to be that sweaty or tired, and she also did not have the physique of a world-class marathoner. Rogers asked Ruiz about her splits, which are the times it took her to run each section of the race, something all runners at that level would keep track of. Ruiz had no idea what splits even were. When Jacqueline Gouraud was asked about Ruiz's improvement from 256 to 231, she raised her eyebrows doubtfully and replied, "She must have very good training." Bill Rogers said,
I think would be very tough to go from 256 to 231.
The biggest red flag was, of course, the fact that none of the other women in the first group saw Ruiz at any point in the race, and Jacqueline Garreau and Patty Lyons both never saw another woman overtake them. Things were not adding up, and before long, the media caught wind of the confusion. Catherine Switzer unofficially ran the Boston Marathon in 1967, making her the second woman to ever finish the race. Switzer asked Ruiz in a TV interview,
"Have you been doing a lot of heavy intervals?"
Someone else asked me that. I'm not sure what intervals are. What are they?
Well, intervals are track workouts that are designed to make your speed improve dramatically. And if you went from a 256 to a 231, one would normally expect that you do a lot of speed work. Is someone coaching you or advising you?
No, I advise myself.
Switzer called Ruiz.
The mystery woman winner, we missed her at all our checkpoints. She came through the finish in a fantastic 231. We have to confirm that time at this point, but she was way ahead of a world-class field here today in the Boston Marathon. Thank you, Rose.
Thank you.
The next day, Ruiz and Rogers, the two winners of the Boston Marathon, were due to appear together on national morning television. Backstage, Rogers told Ruiz this was her chance to come clean if an error was made. Ruiz started crying. Rogers, expecting a confession, was taken aback when Ruiz exclaimed, "I won. I won." Whispers of skepticism within the marathon world quickly snowballed into a scandal picked up by mainstream media. Bill Rogers went to the Boston Marathon race director, Will Cloney, and shared his suspicions. Cloney knew he had to handle the matter delicately. He did not want to harm the reputation of the marathon. Cloney personally spoke with Ruiz soon after the race, where she again maintained that she had won fair and square. The only person who helped back up her claims was her friend and president of a local running club, Steve Merrick, who said he witnessed her run the start of the marathon. Merrick himself had been accused of cheating during the New York Marathon by riding in a car for part of the race. Will Cloney was conflicted and was reluctant to make a ruling without solid evidence. He and the Boston Athletic Association launched a thorough investigation into Ruiz. First, checkpoint data was examined. At the time, the checkpoints only recorded the first 100 runners who passed through. Because the first 100 runners were all men, there was no data on any women who passed through. The investigation then turned to all the video footage that was captured, as well as over 10,000 photographs taken throughout the race. A team of experts, including Catherine Switzer, pored over all the material and were unable to spot Ruiz even once. The New York Marathon also opened its own investigation into Ruiz to determine whether her performance there was legitimate. Meanwhile, the media scrutiny was intensifying as reporters hounded Ruiz outside her New York apartment, and she was eventually driven out of her home. She wanted this all to pass and to let the news cycle forget about her, and hopefully get to hang on to her gold medal. The Boston Marathon investigation interviewed runners who finished around the same time as Ruiz, and none of them saw her during the race. The New York Marathon examined video of every runner who crossed the finish line and never saw Ruiz. However, Will Cloney still didn't believe there was enough solid evidence to disqualify Ruiz. In 1980, John Faulkner was a Harvard senior when he and a classmate decided to jog over the Harvard Bridge to watch the final mile of the Boston Marathon. Faulkner saw Bill Rogers and other men's leaders, then looked to his right as more runners approached from Kenmore Square.
I just saw someone stumble out of the crowd. In front of me, across the street, this was on Commonwealth Ave, probably about a half mile from the finish. She was in track clothes and wearing a number, but I thought someone had just sort of stumbled into the race. Maybe somebody was a little crazy or something.
Faulkner jogged home shortly afterwards, delighted to have caught a glimpse of the marathon winners. The next morning, Faulkner checked the newspaper and his stomach dropped. He had heard mentions of some controversy over the women's marathon winner, but when he saw Rosie Ruiz's photograph, the woman in the yellow t-shirt, he knew he had to blow the whistle. That same day, Susan Morrow, the photographer who chatted with Ruiz on the New York subway, also realized she needed to let someone know about their interaction. She spoke with a New York Times sports writer, and the writer took Morrow to Rosie Ruiz's press conference to make sure this was the same person. It was indeed the same person Morrow had spoken to and traveled with at the New York Marathon. At her press conference, Ruiz faced his...
Sorry, can I interrupt? How hard is it to catch someone cheating? This is impressive, seriously. Christ. Let's do any actual marathon runners out there. Respect to you. You have better stamina than I do, I'll tell you that. Also, don't cheat in actual marathons, by the way. Anyone watching, just, yeah, whatever.
Sea of reporters and continued to insist that she had done nothing wrong. She said that her fellow competitors didn't remember or recognize her because she was new to the sport. She said that investigators reviewing the videotapes mistook her for a man because of her short haircut. She said the whole controversy was made up because the organizers wanted one of the favorites to win, not an unknown runner like herself. She also argued the overwhelming media coverage was a positive thing and would encourage more women to compete in marathons. Ruiz was highly emotional at the press conference, lamenting the fact that she only had a moment to enjoy her win before being unfairly treated by the media and the public. Fred Lebo, the New York City Marathon organizer.
Hang on, my mom's calling. Right, I'm sorry about that. My mother was calling me over the phone. Yeah. Can I just say, seriously, how hard is it to prove someone's cheating? Jesus Christ. I'm actually impressed.
Was already convinced that Ruiz had cheated in both New York and Boston. He wanted to invalidate Ruiz's New York finish time that had qualified her for Boston. This decision would retroactively make Ruiz ineligible for Boston, thus automatically disqualifying her. But Will Cloney, the Boston race director who had a background in law, was still very hesitant and delayed the announcement. Even with 2 solid eyewitness statements and mounting circumstantial evidence, Cloney wanted to double-check every last bit of information before officially disqualifying Ruiz. On the 26th of April, 1980, 8 days after Rosie Ruiz crossed the finish line in Boston, Fred Lebo announced that she was disqualified from the New York City Marathon. Her Boston Marathon title was effectively stripped from her. She maintained her innocence and refused to return her gold medal. Will Cloney let her keep it and even encouraged her to run the Boston Marathon the next year. She never did.
Your ADHD friend avoids busy places? Then this is the one gift that truly supports them. Quick reminder, the best gifts aren't big or fancy. They're the ones that actually get used. So instead of something they'll smile at once and forget, get them something that makes everyday life feel easier. Like Loop earplugs. Loop earplugs aren't a special occasion.
Right. Sorry about that.
After the Boston Marathon cheating scandal, Rosie Ruiz's life went on a downward spiral. She had become infamous all around the world. Her boss, who had paid for her trip to Boston, fired Ruiz upon her return to New York. A year after the debacle, just a few days before the 1981 Boston Marathon, Ruiz sat for a media interview in her lawyer's office and once again insisted that she had been telling the truth the year before. Despite this, she declined many offers, including some that would have paid her thousands of dollars to compete in races and prove she was capable of running an entire marathon. In 1982, Ruiz found a job as a bookkeeper at a New York City real estate agency. She handled all the money that passed through the agency and began skimming money and forging checks. Co-workers wondered how she was able to afford weekend ski trips and daily taxis to work. In a strange twist of fate, Ruiz was arrested on the day of the 1982 Boston Marathon for embezzling $60,000. She spent 1 week in jail and was sentenced to 5 years probation. Ruiz then moved back to South Florida and obtained her real estate license. But she couldn't resist the opportunity to make a quick buck. She recruited 2 other women and formed a cocaine dealing ring. In 1983, Ruiz's 2 co-conspirators met up with a potential buyer for a $52,000 deal. They negotiated and finalized the deal before the buyer revealed himself to be a narcotics detective. The 2 women were arrested, and a week later, Ruiz turned herself in. She was sentenced to 3 years probation. In 1984, Ruiz married Colombian-born Icaro Vivas. They had 3 sons together before divorcing 2.5 years later. She kept the surname, however, to help maintain her anonymity. Whenever co-workers asked if she was the same Rosie who cheated in the Boston Marathon, she would say no and laugh it off. That same year, Ruiz found out that Jacqueline Garreau was in Miami to run a 10-kilometer race. Ruiz had spent years claiming she had beaten Garreau in Boston, yet the 2 had never properly met. So Ruiz made her way to the race, found Garreau and introduced herself. Garreau immediately asked, "Why did you do that in Boston?" Ruiz replied, "I ran it and I'll run it again." Garreau shook her head and walked away. In 1988, Ruiz met Margarita Alvarez at a mutual friend's party. The two women became best friends and then began a romantic relationship that would last until Ruiz's death on July 8, 2019. She had been fighting cancer for over 10 years and passed away peacefully at age 66. Rosie Ruiz's cheating scandal didn't tarnish the legacy of the Boston Marathon, as Will Clonley had feared, and it is still one of the most popular marathons in the world. But since 1980, the road racing world has seen many upgrades to ensure another Rosie Ruiz can never happen. Television cameras now follow the leading runners from start to finish. Every competitor is now given digital tracking chips to attach to their shoes so they can be monitored at all times. In a 1998 interview, Ruiz revealed that she was still in possession of her gold medal. She also said she watched the Boston Marathon every year, calling herself a masochist, and asserted once again that she had won the race. However, Steve Merrick, Ruiz's friend and only ally during the media frenzy, later told the Boston Globe newspaper that Ruiz had confessed the truth to him. She jumped out of the crowd, not knowing that the first woman hadn't gone by yet, Merrick said. She was as shocked as anyone when she came in first. But at that point, they had put the crown on her, gave her the medal, and told her she's the winner. How could she say, "No, I'm not"? Bill Rogers, the men's winner, similarly said she had no idea she was going to win. She was overwhelmed. It wasn't someone who planned to win. Perhaps if Rosie Ruiz had just been a little more patient and waited for a few women to cross the finish line before she jumped back into the race, she could have gotten away with it.
Alright, well, that was that. That was the tale of Rosie Ruiz. Yeah, that's why you don't cheat in the Boston Marathon, I guess. So yeah, thank you all for watching. Hope you all enjoy. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Link to this video in the description and at the end of this video. And yeah, I will see you all next time. Bye.